It depends really what type of games you're playing, how you're playing them, and all that kind of thing. But in the main part, I mean, often games are an activity we can do, and even if we're not actually doing them socially, as in playing online with somebody, the fact that we might have that shared activity, something that we all might be playing the certain game, albeit not at the same time, that's something that kind of psychologically kind of glues us together, and sort of helping to fulfill those sort of relatedness and social needs. But of course, games actually do allow us in many ways to be very social. You know, we can meet up with people there, we can play cooperatively, competitively, have chats and things like that. So there's all sorts of those social relatedness needs that actually games are really good at being able to accommodate.
I think in the first place, I think games most of them are inherently social. So like they are a perfect way to connect while you're quarantined or at home in a lockdown. So I've noticed that with my own partner, who connects with his friends who he usually plays sports with in real life. They now connect over video games. I think the social nature of video games can really be helpful for feelings of loneliness and in a way to connect and maybe even have a casual conversation about how you're feeling while you're playing the game. Without having this meeting where you like, okay, so how do you feel? During maybe when you're doing something together, it's easier to talk about issues than when you're straight up asking for it.
People are at home with their kids. People are not able to see one another in person. So suddenly everyone really understands how important games can be for recreation, for connecting, and for maintaining relationships. And I would guess for a lot of parents, like forging new relationships in a way that they haven't done before.
I mean, games usually are designed around principles of how do you help level up, or how do you complete something to allow you to get to a next stage. That doesn't always have to be linear, but most games have some kind of system where you are developing within the game and in a story or whatever. So that feeds into the gaming quite well as well.
So the stuff she talks about with regard to real life and how difficult it is in your regular work life, especially, it's a little easier when you're a child in school. But in your regular work life, it's hard to find the kind of feedback, whether positive or negative, that you could get from video games. But games can tell you, they usually can tell you pretty easily.
But there are also stories on the internet that Dark Souls has helped people to overcome depression as well. What they say is that it is so difficult, but because they persevered, they kept on going, and they were successful. They learned that they could overcome basically anything. If they could do this, they could. So it helped them a lot in just reframing their life in a way that, this difficult moment I can overcome as well. I did it in Dark Souls. I can do it in my own. I think in a pandemic when, there's no real end goal, or when it really feels hard to stay at home and to move on, I think it's really great to learn such a skill in a video game.
And autonomy, again, this varies depending on types of games, but the fact that you might play games because you just really enjoy it and it's a leisure activity, you've got that freedom to choose to do it. You're not being forced to do it. So that in itself actually is one way that games might be fulfilling autonomy. And of course, some games themselves allow you to be very exploratory, or choose different stories that you might want to go down. So again, some games actually build those sort of things in them as well.
In my study, there was a gentleman who really, the game Life is Strange really spoke to him. And he liked the fact that it had this mechanism called a rewind. You could go back and unmake the last decision you made and get back to the previous point. So I think it's a sense of being able to control in a way that you can't in real life. And that is absolutely what the pandemic is about, right? We can control it, and we don't have information. So you could see where it's very motivating to be in the video game space right now, because they can provide that. And I think before the pandemic, we could understand that as maybe psychological needs that people had that were being unmet, so they would go play video games. But now I think it's a pretty good deal for games because now everyone's in that same situation. So the concept of turning to video games to make up for that makes more sense.